Welcome to my mind. My name is Al Nichols, and you're listening to the EleAMental podcast. This is entry number 67, and it's only been almost 4 years since I sat down here and delighted you with stories of my crazy, warped life. I am finally getting back into this, and it has been a long time coming. It's one of those things that I made a decision that this is important, and I knew that back then even, and I didn't quit this because I thought, whatever, this isn't really something that I want in my life anymore. No, I stopped doing the podcast for reasons I'm going to get into here shortly, but I guess we just need to dive right in, and I need to start explaining myself, because I know that actually the weird thing is that a lot of people were upset when I stopped recording. I never announced it, never talked about quitting, and that was never my intention, to stop making the podcast altogether. But let me give you a little bit of insight on what was happening. So I only did 66 episodes of this podcast up until now. This is episode 67, but I had been doing it for 3 years. I had a real problem. My problem is that every time I would sit down to record, I would have more difficulty communicating what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and actually just being able to get through a session without wanting to throw my recording devices out a goddamn window. And it wasn't because I didn't have anything to talk about. It was, I had things I wanted to talk about and didn't feel safe to talk about them. When they impact your living situation and your career, and when it involves family, that's when things get very difficult. You don't want to hurt anybody. At the same time, you're hurting, and you need an outlet to be able to express that. Now, I've had people in my life personally that I've been able to share with who've been able to help me recover, and I'm still recovering too, but help me get through a really, really difficult period of time in my life. Up until these last couple years, the most difficult time in my life was back when I was, it was in 2005 going into 2006, and I hit a depression wall like I've never hit before, and I was incredibly suicidal, and I was very dysphoric because of my gender and because of so many things going on in my life. I wanted to escape church, the Christian world entirely, but all my friends were Christian. My entire world had been rooted in this religion, this organization that I no longer believed in, that I didn't really want to be a part of anymore. And not because I didn't know if I didn't believe anymore. It was more just, I need to get away from this desperate desire to flee, because it had always been there my entire life, and I was feeling suffocated. And I just needed some time. I didn't know if I was going to, funny enough, I didn't know if I was going to walk away from my faith then. But over time, after I finally was able to get away from a lot of those people who had, anchoring can sound like a positive thing. In this situation, it wasn't. This was the kind of anchoring where, you're not going anywhere. Like how do I describe him now? My aunt's husband who passed away. So not my uncle. I don't even know what the hell, I'm really bad at the family designations, but, he used to call children boat anchors because he didn't want kids. And his reason for saying that was, of course, because, children, the minute you have them, then you're stuck with them and they're going to stop you from doing the things you want to do. And that's true. Now, I guess it depends on how you look at it. Maybe you want children, and that's great. And that shouldn't be a deterrent. I mean, that's kind of a derogatory term, but for him, he went out of his way to have a vasectomy way before he ever met my aunt. He wanted no children and knew that for a certainty. He wanted nothing to come into his life and affect the way that he lived and the things that he wanted to do. And sure enough, he didn't. But I have felt that way for a long time when it came to those crowds of people that I had been stuck in. I wanted to get out. I wanted to meet people outside of that world. and I just couldn't. And even after I left that world, it was almost 5 years before I even started to really break through. And crazy enough, it was actually a lot of help from this podcast that I was able to find people who were more sometimes like-minded or just more interesting or outside of those old scenes I had been a part of. And it was one of the first times where I felt like my voice actually had been heard. The first time I got an email from a mother who had just found out that her child was transgender, born male, was coming out female. She didn't really know what to do. She was looking for help. This was 2013. And I'd only done a few episodes, but I had shared my story. Somehow she had found it. And I ended up being able to help a mother understand her child, something that I wanted when I was this kid's age. And I was able to provide something. So it was like an older version of myself helping a younger version of myself, a childlike version of myself. And in a way also helping myself, like, really. It was a little therapeutic knowing that even though I've went through those things, I can't fix the past. I can never change what's happened. And I can't, it's a real waste of effort to even try. But I was able to do something really positive, and that was a really good feeling. And I continued doing the podcast, and I talked to all sorts of people with different backgrounds. Not all people were transgender, of course. I mean, sometimes just people were dealing with, I'm different, and my family doesn't like different, or my friends don't like different, or my work doesn't like different. And people coming from all different types of backgrounds, feeling a little bit better, sometimes more empowered, to go out and do things that they were too afraid to do before, or they were already doing, but just needed a little bit of encouragement. Whatever role I played for those people, I'm very proud of that. And it's a very therapeutic thing. It has a very unselfish quality to it. And then there is a very selfish quality to it, which is I get to enjoy the benefit of knowing that I've done something to help a life, to help a person live more happily, and more comfortably in this world, and know that not everyone's judging them and looking down on them. And I did that for a very good run. And I didn't do it on a regular basis, of course, because going 3 years and only doing 66 episodes, I could have probably cranked out a few more here and there. But I said what I needed to say. And as time went on, it got harder and harder to sit down and record a podcast, mostly because of real issues going on in my life. Sometimes it was scheduling. When it first started, that's really what it was. I was helping take care of my aunt, not really in a kind of home therapeutic kind of way, not like a nurse kind of way, more like emotional support. And also, she had gone through some pretty bad stuff in her life. In the last couple of years, back in 2011, 2012, she went through some really serious trauma. And the uncle I spoke of, he had passed away. Just in the summer of 2012. And I was in a place where she was at the time was at Texas. I know some of you may already know these stories, so I apologize. But just a little refresher for anybody who might be coming into this new. I was living in Anaheim, California, and my aunt was living in Texas. She had been relocated there by her late husband's family. And before he had passed, and she was kind of stuck out there. She was stuck in a lease in an apartment that her and her husband never even got a chance to live in, that was fully furnished, and she was just alone out there with a mother-in-law who was manipulative and also definitely not a safe person to be around because, well, let's just put it this way. When deaths happen and things happen in your life where money gets involved, it can be real dangerous when you're in a position like my aunt was at that time. So I made a decision. I left my job behind. I left a career behind because I thought this would give me more time to spend on my arts because I didn't need to pay rent living with my aunt, and I ended up moving in with her. And I helped her get around. I was just there for her. And things were good. Things were good for a good amount of time. But as all things in life, good things can turn bad when people act irresponsibly and they don't set boundaries. And sure enough, that's exactly what I did. I made the Cardinal Rule mistake, and that is, do not let people buy you with money. That's not the intention of what was happening. So I want to make this abundantly clear. I'm not trying to paint anyone as a villain, and I would love to mask names, but I've done so much talking on this podcast. Everyone knows. If you've listened long enough, or you can find out pretty easily, and I'm not going to go back and try to edit things out. And I would like to make this really clear. This is more about the things that I failed to do and that I messed up on and ended up, suffering consequences for. Not so much about her. We both made mistakes. I feel like I'm owning up to my own mistakes, and I'm not really going to get into, what was happening with her. But needless to say, money was involved, and there became an expectation, at least I felt that way, that I had responsibilities that I had to uphold because, honestly, everything was being provided for me in my life. I'm only making $500 a month because while I had left my job, I was still doing some things for them and I was still getting paid $500 a month. But that's not a lot of money. That's really no money when you're not enough money to live on, for sure. And I was still pursuing my art and I was trying to get some things going, but she definitely was incredibly helpful and she wanted to be. She was very giving. And that's all wonderful. But when you start to feel like sometimes it doesn't really matter what the person's intentions are or not. Like my aunt's intentions were never to buy me off, with things and trinkets and make me happy that way so she could get out of me whatever she wanted. That was not her goal. Her goal was, I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart because that literally is the person that she is. But the problem started to happen when the money started to dry up. After buying a condo in Los Angeles, after we were there in Texas for 6 months and were ready to get the hell out of there. She had been there a lot longer than that, almost over a year. But I had only been there 6 months and I was transitioning. And I got to tell you, even being so close to Houston, which is kind of a big LGBT hub in Texas, didn't matter. It was just you're dealing with people who are very close-minded, and I have complete sympathy. And I don't know. For anyone who's transitioning in the South, it can be difficult anywhere. Don't get me wrong. But there, you have people who can just be outright cruel. All of a sudden, a Southern hospitality just turns into Southern blatantness, where people aren't really trying to hide how they feel about you. You'll be walking down an aisle in a store and all of a sudden just some lady, right, can just start pointing and laughing at you. A few experiences I actually had in Texas. So it wasn't a great place for me. I was really happy to get the hell out of there because I was still pretty big at the time. I was verging on 300 pounds and I'm trying to make, certain skirts, work. And I'm getting used to all of that. And I'm a little surprised I was able to make it through. When I look back, and I know how familiar I am with my own insecurities and my own past, it's pretty interesting that I made it through all of that. But anyway, so when we got the opportunity to get the hell out of there, we did. But we came out here, and Los Angeles is not a cheap place to live. We were living just an hour outside of Houston, and trust me, it's a lot more affordable to live there. We came here, bought a condo, and you would think, well, that's nice because you don't have to pay all these expenses of rent and everything like that. Well, no. You have property taxes, you have HOA fees, and then you just have the fees of living inside Los Angeles because you are always being penalized for living here. How dare you come here to pursue something? So Los Angeles is always trying to find ways to really get at you, and everything is just incredibly expensive. So all true things, when people talk about it, yeah, they're very true things. It's very difficult to get by here, and it's only made more difficult just for the fact that good jobs here aren't abundant. You know, the people who really do well here are Instagram models, actresses, actors, whoever. You know, I mean, if you recognize them from something, they are probably doing okay living here in LA. But otherwise, everyone else is working 2 or 3 jobs, struggling and running whatever racket they can to stay alive. And pretty soon, after being here for maybe 6 months, that's when we started to run into some problems. And, you know, it was a lifestyle change because all of a sudden, you know, some major things started happening in my life too. As I started getting more comfortable with who I was as a person, I started meeting people and I started wanting to go out and be more social. But I felt like I was not in a position where I could just go do that. My aunt at the time, we pretty much did everything together. And for a time that was okay, but when I wanted to start going out and hanging out with friends, that's when the problem started to occur because, well, just quite frankly, my friends would usually be very interested in specific things, backgrounds, genres, you know, goth community, stuff like that. And she really wasn't any of those things. And on top of that, then she really wasn't communicating. She would sit and just not really talk. And, you know, again, I mean, like, look, we all just need our time to spend with people and we need time away from others too. And I wasn't having any of that. And it got to a very, very difficult place. The pressure kept mounting and building. And then in 2014, my best fiend moved out here to Los Angeles. And we've been inseparable ever since. But did I say inseparable? Okay, all right. I'm just making sure there because I thought I said something else. But anyway, yeah, we have been close the minute she stepped off the plane. And I think that really threatened my aunt because, well, in fact, I know it did because her attitude changed and she got a little bit more, things would set her off a little bit more easily. You know, she just felt like I wasn't spending any time with her. And the truth is she needed people in her life and she needed her own group of friends. She needed her own things to do. You know, she's a believer. She needed a church community. She needed something. But she was in such a bad place emotionally that she didn't have those resources, those outlets. And that's, you know, something totally understandable because, like I said, I spent 5 years like almost with no friends and no nothing. And even today, I don't have huge groups of friends. I don't really know. I mean, I'm acquaintances with people, but for those of you who know me, I don't go around calling people friends who aren't really friends. That's a kind of an honored title with me, you know, not because I'm special, even though I am, but just because I consider that to be something important, something that I'm going to spend time in maintaining. And, you know, it's, you know, something that just don't take lightly because I don't think you should, you know, just because you can hit add friend on Facebook or follow on Instagram or whatever it may be, you know, in real life, relationships don't work that way. And you actually have to put a lot into them, just like if you were growing a plant, you know, or a tree or anything. It takes time, it takes nurturing, you know, it takes care. And of course, it takes boundaries. And that takes me to the part where that's where I really, really fuck things up. I did not establish healthy boundaries, and neither did she. And so you got two people who are grinding on each other's nerves, and we're getting frustrated, and we're having money problems, and we're having all sorts of communication issues, and we don't have the same interest, and we don't always want to go do the same things, but we're both depressed, and we're both handling it in our own different ways, and over time, this just got worse and worse and worse. And we took out the wrath of our problems out on each other, and sometimes, you know, not so not so spearheaded, and I'm not talking about like that, but more passive aggressively for sure. I'm not very passive aggressive. Somebody can pull it out of me if they are. But anyway, again, it's not an issue about me trying to label or blame anybody. This is a situation of, fucked up. I just fucked up. Didn't declare boundaries, didn't say how I was feeling, buried everything deep inside. And you know what happens when you start to do that? You might be thinking, well, for this particular thing in my life, I need to bury this. But I didn't have the luxury of doing that anymore. Here's something that a lot of people don't realize. When you spend your entire life hiding who you are and your thoughts and your feelings and opinions, and for me, that was about my identity, my gender, how I wanted to express myself, what I believed, what I wanted to practice or not practice. You can't just be selective and then your mind automatically goes back to a place where if you're going to bury anything, you're going to bury everything. And that's what happened with me. Is that when I started hiding what I was really wanting to say, when I wouldn't just yell when I needed to yell, or I wouldn't communicate, that I was in distress, that I wasn't happy, that this wasn't working out, and also too afraid, like I said, expensive city. I had the luxury of not having to pay rent, and all I had to do but that had become too much. Because when you are working a job and you have some structure and stability, you make the calls in your own life. You're not at someone's beck and call. You don't have to tell. I think for me, when I started to constantly be asked every time I left, because my bedroom was right next to hers, and she always had her door open, and I would start to leave my room, and I'd be very quiet because I didn't want to catch her attention. But when she would constantly ask me where I was going, that in itself was the big reason of, oh, wow, I should just totally go get a job and get the hell out of here. Because that was an invasion of my own privacy. And I didn't feel good about that. I felt really awful. I felt like a child again. And I felt like I couldn't really make my own plans and do my own things because she wanted to be a part of those things. And I felt guilty for saying no. And honestly, she knew I would feel guilty for saying no, just like she feels guilty when she tells me no. It goes both ways. And so I just, kept my feelings to myself, but I'm going through a lot of pain. I'm going through a lot of depression. My creativity well has dried up, and my ability to communicate, just all in all, not even just with her, but with everyone, started to diminish until it continually went down, and I just wasn't saying anything to anyone anymore. I didn't even know how to start speaking, how I would sit down and try to record podcasts, and trust me, I didn't take a 4-year break here. I have picked up my audio equipment time after time and sat down for hours furiously speaking into the microphone and trying to say anything that made any kind of sense, that I felt good about at all. And I couldn't come up with a goddamn thing. I couldn't come up with a single thing that I felt had any value, that had any weight. I couldn't hold my concentration. Constantly judging myself. Everything had to be perfect, but I'm not a perfect person. I don't communicate perfectly. I really don't. I will start talking and words will start slipping out of my head. I just don't have the capacity. I'm not an idiot, but it's just I have better ways of communicating, and I just so happen to be interesting when I talk, enough so where it catches their attention, but I wouldn't, by any stretch of the imagination, would I call myself a linguist, I do funny voices, and I can communicate some good ideas, but only in, short bursts. And then I get in front of the mic, and I don't know, it's maybe a sort of stage fright where I freeze up. But anyway, as this was all going on in my life, things just kept getting worse. And 2014 was a glorious year for me. Not only had my best fiend moved out here, but things were going really well in my life at that time. I had lost all that weight that I had put on for like my entire 20s. And I went into my 30s really fit, really healthy. I got down to my goal weight. I looked really goddamn good. And I felt good. I was constantly doing stuff. I was always going on adventures. But the problem is that when I would go home after having a fun day of adventures with my best fiend or sometimes other people, but mostly my best fiend, I would come home and I would look at the face of someone who had been home all day, who was hopelessly depressed and was leaning on me to try to pull them out of it. And that was just not possible for me. I couldn't do that. And I would try to be entertaining. I would try to go do dinners. We would go to movies. I used to love going to movies. But during that time, I grew a real hatred of having to go see movies because we ended up seeing everything. And that for me was agonizing because I don't want to see everything. I want to see the things I want to see. And I'm open to see a few things here and there that, don't really pique my interest, but maybe a friend wants to go see it or a family member. And of course, I'm not an asshole. I will go see something that's maybe not my cup of tea. But we were going all the time. We were going constantly. And it was taking any time that I felt like I had a creative burst, it was taking that away. And it just felt more like a chore. It felt like a torture. And, sure enough, today, and we'll get to the today part here shortly, where I am at now, but I really don't see many movies anymore. I just don't. I don't go to the theater all the time because if I don't see something that really appeals to me or I'm just not interested, then I just don't go. And it's such a foreign thought for me because there was a time in my life where movies were almost everything. I loved going to the movies. I would go by myself. I'd have a great time. And I would watch these amazing stories and things that I was just like, oh, I don't really know what that's about. And I just go see it and have fun. I can't do that anymore. And it's because I'm still recovering from honestly, it sounds so stupid that I'm talking about having a difficulty going to see movies. That's my biggest thing that I'm having to heal from. But look, when you're not in control of your life, and you feel like a piece of garbage, you feel like you feel like you're draining people dry financially and and whatever else, you don't feel good about yourself. And as the years went on, as 2015 moved in, I started to fall apart again. I started to put the weight back on. I stopped really working on any type of creative projects. The photography, my modeling that I love doing because I just love doing it. I wasn't really doing it very much anymore. I maybe did a couple shoots that year, and then 2016 even less, and then 2017 even less, until I really wasn't doing it at all. And even now, it's been... my last shoot was back in October. That feels a little weird. That was back in October. I did my last shoot this year. And I'm in a much better place now. But still, this all has taken me time because I'm not only rebuilding my confidence back up, which I had lost, but I'm building back up, my sense of identity, which I thought was pretty durable. I thought it was like Teflon. I was wrong though, because as somebody else came into my life, in the form of family, and because I didn't do the things that I already explained, all of that started to get tore apart because, when people are desperate and people are angry and you're feeling these emotions and you're not expressing things, and what you're doing is you're dismantling your life. And you will eventually cease to be you. You will turn into a husk of what you once were, and it all boils down to your own personal responsibility. It's no one's job to fix you or to tell you when you're in the wrong. you have to do that yourself. And you'll know when you are, and you got to look at the warning signs of people trying to avoid you, just all this stuff, the stuff we know to look for, right? When people start talking about us, or we just can't get a hold of anybody, or, we're doing certain things, certain behaviors, that's when you know it's time to make a change. So we went through those years. And I stopped recording the podcast back in 2015. And the summer of that year, and that was it. That's when I had kind of hit what I thought at the time was rock bottom. I was wrong. That wasn't rock bottom. 2016 was rock bottom. And then 27 was kind of still dragging across the bottom for quite a long time. And even into 2018 wasn't a great year either. So we have just a few years where things weren't going that well. And I didn't really know what was wrong with me. I mean, now it's crystal clear to me, hey, you allowed yourself, in some cases, to be taken advantage of, in other cases that you were the one taking advantage, and you feel like a piece of crap, and, you need to deal with these problems in your life. You need to get in control of things. You need to be responsible once again, and stop pretending that all these things, because while I am coming from a place right now of saying, I accept responsibility for the things that I did to get me here, there was definitely a time where I was pointing a lot of fingers and, and blaming all sorts of people. Some of that, to be honest, was maybe therapeutic because I was coming to terms with a few things that I just hadn't wanted to accept. Sometimes that had to do with my mother and my upbringing, or my grandparents, or even my aunt, or whoever. These people in my life, I had given them a pass on certain things that had happened when I was young, and some of it I needed to deal with. But as time went on, I started to realize, look, again, things that happened in the past, and you can only be really responsible for what's happening right now. That's in your hands. You get to make the next choice. And it is hard. It is hard to start your life over, or retrain yourself, or deprogram. It's very, very difficult to do those things. But I have had to spend a lot of time growing and maturing and learning how to, get back in some ways to a better version of myself. But at the same time, desperately trying not to just, as I said, 2014 Elle was amazing, but I don't want to be 2014 Elle again. I want to be what 2019 Elle is supposed to be, 2020, 2021. Who does that person look like? What is going on in their life? What changes have they made that are more positive? Because if 2014 Elle were so amazing, as I've built it up in my head, then why was 2014 Elle so easy to break? And that's because there was a fundamental flaw. As many things that I had improved in my life, it was another draft of me rewriting what my life was going to look like after going through many, many years of my life, people telling me exactly what my life was going to be. But the problem was that I still hadn't dealt with everything, and I still haven't dealt with everything now. But that's why we have to take a look at ourselves every once in a while. We have to re-gauge where we're at, and we need to course correct. We need to say, we need to shift over here. We need to start doing these things. And so as 2017, as we got into that year, I knew there was a major problem. There had been some major confrontations with my aunt. And there had been a lot of tension. And I was feeling very angry about certain things. And I felt guilty for feeling angry because I felt like that was being ungrateful. But I'm coming to recognize now that I needed to be angry because anger was the only thing that was going to get me out of that situation. And I had to let go of years and years and years of guilt. I had to stop looking at my aunt as if she were some sort of victim, or, as if she were like handicapped. Stuff that had been built up in my mind, because I don't even know when it happened exactly, but I think it's the nature of my family. When someone's hurt or someone's in need, we want to help them. But when that time for them needing help is over, or even when really the time is maybe they still need help, but your responsibility in the matter should come to an end, because you need to be a little bit selfish and still put yourself, as a priority in your life, because you'll be no good to anybody if you put yourself on the back burner. But it finally got me to the point where I was sitting in my mom's place of February of 2017, and I sat down and I was talking to my mom, and I was just expressing how I was feeling. It had been the first time that I'd been real honest about a lot of things. And she's heard, I'm sure, many stories from my aunt about the problems she had with me, and rightfully so. We needed an outlet to communicate. And sitting there that night, I had come to a decision after talking with my mom, which, with all the problems that we've had in our past, me and my mom actually have a very good relationship. I don't agree with her about everything, usually about politics. She can be very conspiracy theory oriented. But all of that aside, my mom is also very wise when it comes to people and a lot of things. After talking with her, I just said, I'm going to move out by my birthday. And that gave me a certain amount of time. I'm like, I need to start making money again. I need to start figuring out where I'm going to live. I need to start figuring out how to make this work. And so I ended up getting my old job back, and I started working full-time again. Though for me, for that job, when I say full-time, it's not a job that really demands a 40-hour work week. It's more of a job that demands like maybe 2 days a week. And I get paid a certain amount of money because it's not really by the hour. It's more about anyway, it's by contract. So I started getting back into that. And so I started having a regular revenue stream once again, which started to help rebuild my confidence. And as the summer came, things started to get a little bit crazy. As I mentioned earlier, property taxes and all this stuff. Well, we had taken loans out on the property when we really started to get into hairy financial situations. And of course, those loans were coming due. They weren't desirable loans. They weren't good. We didn't have the money to really pay them. So there was really only one solution. It was we needed to sell the condo. And so that's exactly what my aunt did. And it wasn't very long where throughout that summer we ended up orchestrating, like moving out and preparing to, do what we needed to do. But I had told her, I communicated with her, I'm staying here in Los Angeles and I'm going to find a place on my own. She didn't know exactly where she was going. She ended up back in Orange County, which actually makes me feel a little bit better. I didn't feel like she was happy here in Los Angeles. And also, I didn't know if she was safe here in Los Angeles. That was another thing that I was always feeling. But, it's just one of those things. It's just I needed to make a choice for myself, and I needed to choose to be independent. So October came, and we were basically put in a really tight crunch to move out within a few days, not like 30 days, how we had originally believed we were going to do. So I ended up finding an apartment only in the matter of 48 hours. And I put down my deposit and I immediately start moving. And I'm literally moving the rest of my stuff out the day that the new owners are moving in. And I'm like passing them by as I'm taking my last load out and waving, hi. And I ended up moving into my own apartment, my first apartment that was exclusively mine. And I moved in there October 2017, which was just actually a couple days before my 34th birthday? Yeah, 34th birthday. And I felt really good about that move. I finally thought, all right, now we're going to get my life back on track, all right? Now that, my thought at the time is, now that this relationship that's grown toxic, now that we have some distance, we can heal, we can get to know each other once again. We can be able to actually spend time with each other and enjoy it for a change. And that's actually been true. But my thought was that now that I don't have this going on in my life, everything's just going to go back to the way that it was before. I'm just going to do my job, but now I know who I am. I know what I want to do. I know what I want to pursue. And I moved into that apartment, and I was excited, and I started preparing, and I got, green screens, and I got lighting equipment, and I got cameras and some more mics. I got my office set up, and I was ready to start rolling. And then I sat on my couch. And then the day would go by, and then I would go to my bed. And then I would sleep. And then eventually I'd get up the next day, and I'd go to Starbucks and drive around a little bit, grab a sandwich, come home, and sit on my couch. And I'd look at my laptop for hours on end. And then eventually I'd go back to bed, and the cycle repeated day after day after day until the illusions of me trying to really push through and do anything, I eventually gave up on that. I thought I was going to start recording new podcasts immediately. Yeah, that didn't happen either. Nothing happened the way that I thought it was. And again, it was me trying to, hopscotch over the problems, skip a few steps, skip all the steps, and just think, oh, now healed. Everything's fine now. Didn't need to go through that painful process of coming to terms with my poor decisions and, my identity, which is completely crumbled. I can just grab it back. No, none of that was like that. I spent a good solid year in that apartment being horribly depressed, not going out, getting bigger, drinking myself into oblivion. That was something new. Never had a real problem in my life with over drinking or getting really drunk. But that became a recreational activity because I needed something to distract me. And I didn't have someone at the readily available to blame anymore, because when I looked in the mirror, all I saw was myself. When I walked around my apartment, I was only hearing me. No one was asking me anymore, well, where are you going? What are you doing? When are you coming back? No one was asking me those questions anymore. It was just me. And when I was finally in the position where I had that freedom, I did absolutely nothing with it. Instead, I shriveled up into a ball, and I still didn't know who the hell I was anymore. I didn't know if that was achievable even to even be better than what I was in that moment. And as the days, dragged on, every day became a new obstacle to try to figure out, why the hell am I even here? Why am I still here? I feel like the last one at a party, and everyone knows how I feel about being the last one at a party. You don't want to do it. It's pathetic, and I would rather bail. and I'm a person who's always had suicidal thoughts, even tendencies. And I don't get into it a lot because I don't think that's something that people should be like, oh yeah, I'm so suicidal. It's like, suicide is a trend, right? Like, I don't look at it that way. When you're really seriously considering, end of life, by your own hands, that's not something that is a trend. It's not sexy. It's not romantic. It's none of those things. It's terrifying because you're willing to overcome this sense of self-preservation that most humans have, but for whatever reason in your head, you don't have that anymore. And you wonder if you ever really had it to begin with. So I was going through all of those motions, and I'm self-medicating, and I'm doing this stuff. And I mean self-medicating with the alcohol. And I'm trying to do whatever I can to feel sane, to feel normal. But in that entire time, I never really took a deeper look. I think I was too afraid to, because I'm in this apartment alone. You know, there's something very scary when you're exploring those depths of yourself, literally by yourself, with like no other human around. And the apartment was always a little too quiet. Like, I desperately needed some noise. And when the only noise I could provide was from a TV or something, I don't know, I thought it was going to be my refuge, my spa, you know, where I could recover and get back into a functional life again. But it was really an asylum. No matter what I did with the place, no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I felt good, I was in an asylum, banging on the walls, pulling out my straitjacket, not sure what the hell to do with myself anymore. And I'm trying to emulate a person I once was and trying to get back into that, trying to dress like that person. But I couldn't do that. I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel secure. I didn't have the cojones that L. Nichols in the past had. That was all gone. I was like, is this gone for good? Is this fear? Is this tension that I'm feeling? Is this my new permanent state? And I didn't know. I didn't know how to answer that question. And again, terrifying, because you want some definitives on that. You don't want to go through your life trying to figure that out. You want something to be able to hold on to and say, this is my path, you know, this is what I'm doing, this is what's going on. And everything that I thought I would never question came into question. Am I really a transgender person? That's a weird question, because you'd think like you'd know that. And I had definitely spent enough time exploring that question to know that answer, but still, it's like I didn't trust myself anymore. And I'm like, am I just a wreck of a human who is grasping at straws, trying to figure myself out? Now, let me make a few things clear. L. Nichols, the person you all know and love, is very much alive today, but they went in a deep freeze for a while, and they're still thawing. So I'm here right now, shivering a little bit, you know. Can't believe we elected Donald Trump to be president of the United States. I'm still not convinced that this isn't some elaborate reality show where we're all going to be punked across the country for, you know, I hope anyway. You know, it's been some very difficult years, but you're listening to a person who's coming through that finally, who doesn't just see the light at the end of the tunnel, but is emerging from it. And in, like I said, a very long time. And I've gotten really used to being in that dark place in my life. And so when I wake up now, it's a little bit different, because I'm not desperately trying to figure out what the hell to do with my day. I know exactly what I want to do now. It's weird so I'm getting ahead of myself, but back in January of this year, sitting in my best fiend's living room, and we're talking, and I just come to the decision, like, I need to get the hell out of my apartment. So I end up moving into a bedroom, living with roommates. And, you know, I kind of thought like I needed my own place. I've come to realize I need people around me. And these are good people that I trust. And, you know, I just made decisions. I'm like, I need to do some things. Because one, it was a real drain on my finances. And that was definitely a big stress when every month what you're really getting paid, everything that you're getting paid is going directly to your landlord. And you're really left with not enough to survive on. So now I'm in a much better situation. I'm glad that I did have my own apartment, and even though I call it the asylum, well, I needed to go check in somewhere because it wasn't going to happen overnight. I wasn't ready to face a lot of things. And I'm still going through the process of facing some very difficult things, coming to some realities, you know, owning up to my mistakes. And now I'm in that process of rediscovering the things that I love again, the things that make me feel like me. You know, finding out what is my style now, you know, like just questions like that. Like, where am I, you know, getting a grasp on my new reality. And, I gotta say, getting out of my apartment was one of the best decisions I ever made. I could have stayed, I could have kept doing that, but it was, I don't think I would have ended up anywhere that I wanted to be there. I just think that as much as I wanted to be ready to live on my own, I wasn't, and I don't know if I'll ever really be. I'm the kind of person who needs people around. As much as I'm an introvert and need my privacy, I also need people, you know, in the vicinity. I need to hear things happening. There's a feeling when you know people are present that brings some security and also helps you feel a little bit more rooted. You know, one of the positive anchors, right? Not one of the bad ones, one of the positive anchors. And, you know, it's totally fine when you want to be anchored in the place you want to be. You know, of course you want to be anchored there. But anyway, I'm in a much better place now. And over the last couple of months, as I've, because this healing process has been going on for a really long time. But I think now after this move, there's just been so many things that have been stirred up and so many things that I've been thinking about. And of course, you know, my best fiend, she was real with me and got in my face in the best and loving way possible, not like viciously, you know, but she does tell me how it is. And, you know, and she let me know, like, you are better than what you're doing right now. You know, and reminding me of the person I once was, but not that I need to go back there. Again, reminding me, like, you were a person who loved adventure, you know, like these core values, these core things about me, reminding me that they're still there. They just need to be awakened. And, you know, things are starting to come back. It is like everything had dulled. My vision, my taste, my hearing, everything had dulled, and life had become bland and colorless and blurry. And it's really hard to enjoy things when you literally can't have those sensations. And that's what life was just like nothing really got me excited anymore. Not movies, not dinners, not restaurants, you know, not places, locations, theme parks, vacations, none of that. None of that made me excited. And you need things in life that make you excited. And for me, you know, the potential to tackle new types of art, new types of creativity, and also to get the hell behind the mic again and be able to share just like this is something that I'd never trade for. Well, I mean, to a point. There's some things I would trade it for. But genuinely, this has brought me so much joy in my life. Doing this, sitting here, speaking from my heart, talking about things that I felt were important, this is what I need to be doing. This is what makes me feel rooted and whole again. And, you know, in a way, I've come to understand that the only appeal that religion had to me was the structure that it provided, because it made everything accessible in this one simple organization. You just had to follow the rules, and then all these things coming into your life. It built friendships and relationships and potential marriages and all sorts of stuff. It connected you with your family. It brought you holidays and traditions, and it brought you a place where you felt like you had this creator who understood you. And even though I always struggled with those beliefs and never really grabbed onto them, I wanted to, because for the people that it did work for, I saw them being very happy. But I mean, there was just no way a transgender kid in the middle of a church youth group looking around at people who had no idea who the hell I was and didn't care. Anytime any of those things came up, it was always, well, we're going to be casting some devils out tonight. Who's ready to cast out some devils? You know? I'm really glad I'm not there anymore, and I'm glad I'm around people who are supportive and loving and genuinely like me for me. Even though I'll admit I've not been the most amazing, fun, entertaining person that I once was. You know, I used to be, and I keep using that term because it's like you get comfortable associating with yourself, you know, like, oh, I'm so miserable now, but I used to be so amazing. No, I'm getting back there. I'm getting back everything that I feel like was destroyed, that was stolen from me, you know? And it's taken some time. And, but I'm getting there. And this is the start of that. Me sitting down here and sharing you the last couple of years. And there's so much more to get into, but we're almost at an hour. And I don't really want to go any more than an hour, even though I feel like I could keep talking, which is a really good sign. But I'm going to end it here, and we'll pick up next time. I do plan to have my best fiend, as I always like to call her. I'm not saying her name because I'm not sure if she really wants me to say her name right now. So, you know, just so I don't have to edit it out if I'm wrong or if I'm right. It doesn't matter. Just my best fiend. I'm going to have her on the next podcast, and we are going to go a little bit deeper, maybe touch base on a lot of the things that I brought up here. But she had a different perspective on all this. She saw it happening. She was the one consoling me and trying to help me, and could see me being self-destructive and what was happening. And I'd love to have her sit down and really go through this with me, because we've talked about it many times, but I feel like it's one of those things that, you know, we hear a lot of stories, and this definitely transcends being transgender, but, you know, it is a problem that I think just humans deal with. And if you are a member of the LGBT community, this is definitely one of those things you deal with. And but we don't hear those stories very much. We hear about the process of transition. Well, you've heard that from me. And there's so many now, voices that weren't around when I first started doing this, but definitely are present today. And it makes me so happy to be living in a world where I know people are very, very angry that there's such discrimination and hatred. But if someone doesn't hate you, you're not doing your job right. You know, that's the way I've always looked at it. And I know that can seem, you know, very unsensitive when it comes to what's happening to people, when people are being killed. And I don't mean it like that. I mean that you're always going to have somebody who's against you, who just doesn't like you, who despises your life, because usually that comes from a place of, like, why do you have everything so easy? Why do you have everything so good? Why do you have this amazing life? I hate you, you know? It comes from a place of jealousy. And sometimes just people, even if it's not from jealousy, what it is they want you to be on their level or lower. They don't feel like they can come up, so they would rather tear someone else down. And that gives them some satisfaction. It's very sick and very destructive and toxic. Definitely not something anybody should be around. And I see too many people like that. This is LA. I mean, you can't go a block in LA without encountering at least a dozen people who would totally love to rip into you just so that they can feel just a little bit better about their day, about their life. But anyway, we're definitely going to get into a lot more. And I do want to say one more time, just to clarify this, and I feel like I already have, but let me be very, very, very clear. I don't blame my aunt. I don't. Like I said, I accept the blame. I accept the blame for the things that I did and the things that I didn't do. And hopefully this is something that people learn. Set boundaries in your life. You know, don't allow, whether the person is intentionally trying to guilt you or not. In my situation, I wasn't being intentionally guilted. Most of the time. Sometimes, yes, but not all the time. But I was still feeling guilty about things that I couldn't change or control, about what was happening in her life. But that does not make me responsible to fix them. We are all responsible for ourselves and what we do, and we have to remember that at the end of the day. You know, you can't take on those challenges for other people. They need to figure it out themselves. And as long as you don't let them, go through the tribulation, go through the oppression, the depression, all of those things. When you don't let people do that, then you are preventing them from healing. And the weird thing is that I got into a place of arrested development in my life because, my life was constantly about growing and healing. It wasn't something that was over just because I was 2014 version of me. No. I still had things I had to deal with. I still had emotional issues. I still had a problem with the fact that even to this day, even though my family is completely aware of who I am and what my identity is, but still we don't like to talk about it. It's just one of those things we just don't talk about. And I don't want that. I don't want, and also like people almost ignoring it. And that's always been a problem in my life. Like the things that we're afraid of, the things that don't line up with our religious beliefs, we understand you're doing it, but thank you for not bringing it into our eyesight. See, I don't like that either. And as much as I love my mother and my family, that's one thing that I'm going to have to change. And, in the next year, it's not something that I can do it down the road. No, it's something that has to change. Because in order, again, for my healing to continue, for me, because again, this is what I was saying, this is what I was trying to get at. When you bury your emotions, you bury your thoughts, your feelings, even once, even over something, you can label it as I'm not ready to deal with it. But when it's time to deal with it, you have to deal with it. When it comes to the forefront and it becomes a present, like a clear and present danger, you have to deal with it right then and right there, because if you don't, it's going to stop you from developing. It's going to stop you from maturing. You have to deal with it. You have to get on with it. And you really just won't be happy until you do, because you'll know where you fucked up. You'll know where you completely just dropped the ball. So don't repeat my mistakes, please. Youngins, don't repeat my mistakes. Just be happy. Be healthy, make good decisions, set clear boundaries with people. Let people know where you stand. Let them know when they've hurt you, and really find someone. If it's not your therapist, find someone you can really confide in, because if you are a person who has a lot of friends, but you don't really talk to any of them and tell them what's happening in your life, then reevaluate how you see friendship, because it's not, again, as I said at the beginning of this, it's not an add button. It's not click, we're friends. No. Again, it requires patience, time, and dedication. And then, here's a real problem in LA. It's a problem everywhere, but it's something that I notice when I go out here. People don't listen. People want you to fawn over them, but they don't listen. And they'll fawn over a person here and there. They won't fawn back to you. No. They have their own people that they admire, but it's like a chain. It's pecking order. You need to be able to listen about what's going on in other people's lives and ask them questions and figure out, about what you can do for them. Just listen. It's so important to listen. Just as much as it is to say what you're feeling and what you're thinking, you got to listen to. That's been a real challenge for me, to be honest. And again, I'm going too far here. So we'll pick that up next time about listening and how my ass has such a hard time when it went from being so teachable to now resistant, because I don't want to be the Padawan learner anymore. I want my life to feel like I'm somewhat, achieved. What does that even mean? I don't know. But I want to have that feeling of achievement. And maybe it's just something that'll never come. That's just self-delusion. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me here on this podcast. Please go follow me on Instagram and Facebook at EleNichols. I'm there, EleNichols, on all platforms, including Twitter. Send me your questions. And of course, you can also email me, info@elenichols.com. The website where I post all my blog posts is over at houseofel.com. That's HOUSEOFELE.com. Thank you for joining me here. Stay extraordinary and escape the ordinary. Goodbye, everybody.